Over to a NewsX Sunday Guardian Global exclusive. When Pakistan learned that Donald Trump was going to be President of the United States of America, Pakistan launched a lobbying shopping spree in Washington. Yes, the aim was to hire lobbying firms close to Trump with money and quickly shift Trump's foreign policy administration in their favor. Documents reviewed by the Sunday Guardian have revealed that the first deal was signed in October 2024. Let's quickly understand what we've learned through our investigation so far. Vijay Leke Sivach, former Chief of Territorial Army Defence Expert, is with us live. Ambassador Bhashpati Mukherjee, former diplomat, also joins us live. Dilip Cherian, International Affairs Expert, is live with us. We also have Pathikrit Payan, Foreign Affairs Expert, joining us live. Let me make a start with you first. Major General Sivach, what do you make of this explosive report by NewsX and the Sunday Guardian exposing what Pakistan was resorting to?
There's no doubt about it. See, Pakistan is always known to think ahead, and it believes in information, misinformation, and political propaganda. And they knew it that once it is clear that Donald Trump is going to come and he can be manipulated by the lobbying firm. Pakistan hired almost about 10 to 15 lobbying firms, paid quite a huge amount. And this money, everyone knows it. It's not that Pakistan, the financial condition is quite weak as to how can they afford. This money they collected through basically drugs money, which ISI is responsible for collecting through all these terrorist group organizations. But what is more important is that they have thought ahead and they wanted to make sure that they could influence the decision making in Donald Trump government. And they knew it that they are on a weak footing as far as money laundering and terrorist funding is concerned. They can be put on a grey list by Financial Action Task Force. That was their main aim, that they can lobby there in US and they are never put in grey list in time to come. The second thing, they were trying to cooperate and coordinate with the US in counter-terrorism. They basically caught ISIS bomber, which was Abe Gate, and they handed over to US authorities. In addition to that, they were doing also anti-India propaganda. And that was very important because they knew it the anti-India propaganda will benefit them tremendously in the US. Now, if you remember the sequence of action which have taken place recently, when the Iran and US war was very imminent and the US wanted help of Pakistan after Operation Sindoor, Donald Trump invited the chief of army staff of a country that is basically of Pakistan, and he has gone there. He has spoken with him. What was the aim? The aim was to influence him because Pakistan is been always used by the US as a frontline state, and they wanted that in case they go for a full-fledged war against Iran, they needed air bases, they needed the logistics support, they needed Pakistan airspace. So therefore, Pakistan has been always used by US as a frontline state, whether it is when they were fighting against Soviet Union, Mujahid were produced by Pakistan. Then against Taliban, when Pakistan-Taliban relation was very good, George Bush told them in no uncertain term, either you are with us or you are against us. And you know that Pakistan take a U-turn and went with US. So they knew it. They know as to how things function in Washington, and very cleverly they have hired these 13 basically lobbying and influencing firms. And as the sequence of events which we have narrated, what has happened after Sindoor, it clearly shows that US had a lot of interest in Pakistan being a frontline state, known NATO ally, and being its geostrategic location. Because in case they want to influence in Afghanistan against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they need Pakistan bases. If they want to attack Iran, they need Pakistan bases. If they want to keep an eye on China and to some extent Central Asian state and Russian, they need Pakistan. And Pakistan makes use of it. So one thing is very clear, that if we think that the US is going to have a very good relation with India, we are part of a Quad and they are going to take our side, I think we can be mistaken. We must be very alert. Pakistan is a frontline state of US as on today also, and you will find it, their relationship going better day by day. And the second thing is very important. Pakistan know it as to what is the political scenario today in Washington. And since they hired this lobbying firm, they will make sure that all action and decisions which are taken in US, they are pro-Pakistan.
Right. Let me also bring in Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee at this point. Ambassador Mukherjee, clearly, of course, this is what Pakistan has been resorting to, not just this year, but reportedly 6 months before the Trump presidency began. They got a hint that he was coming to power, and they decided to begin spending thousands and thousands of dollars. In fact, the amount runs into millions, actually. What do you make of this explosive report?
Well, first of all, Uday, let me clarify that hiring of lobbying firms is nothing new. India has done it in Washington for decades. We haven't used drug money, of course. We've used very respectable lobbying firms, and this is normal practice in Washington among many countries. The difference in this particular case is that you have a transactional US president who can be maneuvered one way or the other, depending on where his family's business interests lie. So I think, respectfully, I would submit that it is not the success of the lobbying firms alone which Pakistan spent its drug money on, but the fact that the Bitcoin and the lure that it held out for Trump's close family members played a very important role in Trump's sudden and puzzling switch over to the Pakistani side. On the other hand, it is also important to remember that in the hostilities between India and Pakistan, which Trump takes credit for, although he knows very well that it was the Pakistani DGMO who asked us for a ceasefire, that those hostilities on the Pakistan side were actually a joint China-Pakistan front against India, which China utilized to test its weapons against India. That then brings us to the fundamental question as to where does President Trump wish to be in this strategic triangle? Does he wish to side with Pakistan, knowing that the western border of India is now a double front between Pakistan and China on one hand against us. On the other hand, we have the open Bangladeshi border. We have an extremely dangerous situation in Myanmar, not to speak of the very long Sino-Indian border. I would say, and I'm sure Major General Sawaj would agree with me, that never for a very long time has India faced so many challenges on its border as we are facing now. But coming to, therefore, whether Pakistan is a frontline state of United States or of China, I would say Pakistan is a frontline state of China. And therefore, at some point, the Americans, whether it is Trump that we have to endure like an aching tooth until the midterms when he becomes a lame duck, or any other US president, at some point the Americans will have to understand and decide that if Pakistan is a frontline state for China, then it cannot be a frontline state for United States, because that would be completely illogical. Therefore, I do think that at some point of time, lobbying firms or no lobbying firms, the Americans will have to decide who to dump, and in that particular case, they would have to dump Pakistan.
Okay, does this explain though, Dilip Cherry, this softening of stance by the US towards Pakistan, this rethinking by Donald Trump on his approach towards Pakistan from what it was in his first presidency to now? Does this explain that? According to you, what do you make of this report and its contents?
My sense is that, as Ambassador Mukherjee said, use of lobbying firms is something that countries have always had access to. Therefore, there is nothing unique in that, except, and this is very interesting, the fact that the report says that they hired them 6 months before the election. If that is indeed true, then somebody on their side had taken a call, which clearly we had not been able to, that Trump was the man to back without doubt. That's one. Don't forget that in Washington, as everybody in the business knows, and I've been in the lobbying business for long enough to know this, the sides are very clear. Who has access to who is very clear. So if you're hiring a firm at a very large price, you're paying for access to key people in the administration. That means you have to take a bet that you expect that a Trump presidency is on its way. If you recall, during that time, we were still hedging our bets. As a country, maybe we had to do that. But I think the fact is that for whatever reason, the Pakistani generals took a call and decided that they wanted to go in this direction. That's one. Second, it's important to also acknowledge that everybody by now across the world has seen that the Trump administration really works largely engined by self-interest. So being able to access and find routes of personal aggrandizement for various members of the Trump family is a certain route to success with this administration the way it is. So for the moment, we have to recognize that Pakistan outplayed us. And as far as recent events are concerned, remember that they've just handed over and been able to show that by handing over the terrorist who was responsible for the blowing up of American soldiers at the gates of the airport in Kabul is something that has given them further leverage in Washington with the establishment, which means it goes beyond Trump, because they've been able to show good faith actor kind of behavior. That is not what the Pakistan state is. We all know that. But they are able to prop up things at the appropriate time to try and make sure that their messaging stays useful, consistent, and therefore very effective. So we have to recognize that we are in that kind of a situation where behind the lobbying firms is the kind of so-called anti-terror, counter-terror kind of activism that Pakistan is willing to do on a pick and choose basis. But as General Sivat said, there is no doubt that Pakistan sees itself as a frontline state for the US, but actually has become a frontline state for China, and China will have to either duck a little bit more out of sight, and that's impossible in geopolitics as it is being played out now, or America will have to reach its moment when it decides which side to choose and how to play this in the next leg of this journey. There is going to be a Trump version 3, which we will see after the midterm, and then let's see how India is able to play its cards even better, because at the moment, I would say we are playing the game inadequately.
Let me take that to Pathikrit Pine as well. Pathikrit Pine, what do you make of this report, this strategy adopted by Pakistan? Do you believe this is what has led to this change of heart for the US president? Also, how should India be responding, reacting, re-strategizing, looking at these details emerging? Pathikrit.
Look, first and foremost, I don't think America will ever play binary because for them, they'll play both sides. And that has always been the game. Politics is all about that. I mean, they would say that if you don't give up on Russia, why should we give up on Pakistan? Secondly, not everything depends upon the American president. There is something called the establishment. The establishment has its own philosophies and theories on which United States is run. It doesn't depend on Trump. The problem is we have to understand, it's not a question of whether Pakistan has outsmarted us. I mean, there is no question of any comparison. The issue is this. You are today a $4 trillion economy. The Americans always deal with countries based on how they perceive that country would be in the next 10 years. So in a 10-year spectrum, if you look at India, it's going to be a $10 trillion economy. Now, in the American think tanks, it is said like this, that China is a problem for today India is a problem for tomorrow because it has its own independent foreign policy. It is creating a third concept, a completely different dimension to voice of global South. They are saying we are neither this side nor that side. Now, that's not something the Americans are comfortable with. So, what is Pakistan lobbying for? It's not that what Pakistanis are lobbying for is exactly what we should lobby for. It's not like that. The Pakistanis are lobbying for this, desperate to show that our strategic relevance still remains. So American concept would be still the same, that they would want, and they are at the top of the food chain, and they want to remain there probably 20 years down the line. So they would engage with India, have business with India, but at the same time they'll do whatever they can to contain India in some or the other way. And for that, if they have to rediscover the importance and utility of Pakistan, they'll do that. I would not say that the Pakistanis had a victory and outsmarted us because of somebody being caught for assassination of American in the Afghan-Pakistan border. Because had it been so, United States would not have designated the TRF as a terrorist organization. So we have to understand that this is not a big game of binary. The Trump administration is desperate because they realize that BRICS, if not today, 10 years down the line, will come up with an alternate to dollar. The Americans realize that they can't threaten India and have a trade deal. The Americans realize that India is coming up as a country with its own independent, military-industrial complex, which can actually take on the American and the Chinese weapon systems. And tomorrow they are going to pitch those weapon systems globally. So even though today we are comparatively a $4 trillion economy, and America is a much bigger economy, among the top 5 economies of the world, Germany and Japan has reached saturation point. The only one apart from China which has a potential to grow is India. They want India to remain a major market. That's why they don't want to destroy India. They don't want to create problem otherwise, but they would do everything possible to contain India. And that's why Pakistan remains and would be a strategic partner and a strategic asset for United States. To say that, Americans will never disown and give up on Pakistan, knowing well that if they do it, that the Chinese will completely have a stranglehold on Pakistan, which they do not want. So this is what a game Pakistan will keep on playing on both sides. Now, for us, when you are a $4 trillion economy aspiring to be a $10 trillion economy, all that you should focus on is your own economy, in your own capacity building, and the result of is this, that in spite of all the warnings and the threats and veiled threats that Trump was making to the Apple CEO, Apple still keeps on investing in India because it's far more feasible for Apple to make it in India and still sell it to United States with a 20% tariff than to make it in United States. So I think as you aspire to be a $10 trillion economy, you would have these problems coming and you have to know how to deal with it. I'm sure we are good at that. It is not a game every day that we decide who has gone ahead. When you have that kind of a decisive attack on Pakistan and the results are for everyone to see, invariably the Americans will not be happy. The Americans will do something. So, and you have to learn to live with it. The issue is this: lobbying Pakistan does for a specific reason. Yes, I do believe we should be working more on the information warfare, on narrative building. We need more friends in the West. But in spite of that, please remember, beyond the point, the West will never be happy with us because you are moving ahead to create an alternate discourse which the West is never comfortable with. And remember, what these threats by the NATO chief, that 100% tariff and all that, why is it coming? Because remember what Jaishankarji stated in 2022, where he stated about Europe, and I look at it from the Europe and the American perspective, that Europe must come out of the mindset that the Europe problem are the world's problem, but the world's problems are not the Europe's problem. So today you have a country which is coming up with alternate solution, which is being looked upon by the voice of global South, 125 countries. You would face these problems. Pakistan, beyond the point, is an itch. We are not in a competition.
Right. Okay. Let me quickly go back across to you, Ambassador Mukherjee, on this point, of course, and relooking at, of course, this our strategy. Does our strategy need a relook? Looking at how Pakistan has handled this, A, and B, of course, going forward, is this all about then deals that the Trump administration is looking for? Quid pro quo.
We must, the Indian media and all of us, policymakers, diplomats, all of us, must avoid ourselves hyphenating India with Pakistan. This is something which is highly avoidable. As Pratikrit correctly pointed out, there is no comparison between India and Pakistan. The discomfort of the West, exactly as he pointed out, is because we are fast developing into an independent power center. And therefore, if the Americans think that China is a nuisance today, they look at us as a potential nuisance tomorrow. But they can't stop it. India's rise is unstoppable. Under those circumstances, we have to understand that, as I said, fundamentally and always, Pakistan will be a frontline state for China. That is how the geopolitics of the region play out. And whether the West accepts it or does not accept it now, the Americans will accept it, if not now, then later. As far as independent judgment is concerned, we have all heard what we have said about Russian oil. You have heard what we said about unilateral European sanctions. We are an independent player. We cannot be bullied either by the NATO Secretary General, who comes from that very small country called Netherlands, to which I was an ambassador when he was Prime Minister. We cannot be bullied by Trump either. Therefore, since we have that kind of independence, we are looked at with suspicion because we are a potential for making a niche for ourselves, which is both independent and strategically important for world powers to look at in the future. Under those circumstances, I would suggest, let's not hyphenate ourselves with Pakistan. Let us understand that whatever Trump does or not, and I was very interested by what Dilip said about Trump's 3.0, I agree with him. Trump 3.0 would be worth looking at depending on how he does in the midterms, and he may not do well in the midterms since he's annoyed most of his MAGA supporters. So we have to look at what happens to Trump 3.0 and handle it from there and understand that we perhaps need to become much more aggressive in narrative building. I would agree with Dilip on that. But on the other hand, what Pathikrit said is very, very clear. We are a
General Sivaj, this is also very interesting that Pakistan, which of course is resorting to bailouts from IMF and other world bodies, has over $3.5 million to spend on this. This clearly once again shows the misplaced priorities of Pakistan, isn't it, General Sivaj? And also shows how their people also should see this. They are suffering from power cuts, from inflation and from all sorts of travails. And this is where money of Pakistan's exchequer is being spent.
See, Uday, one thing one must clear that Pakistan, when it was taken out from Financial Action Task Force, it was kind courtesy US. Because that time also Pakistan was involved in money laundering and terrorist funding. Now, once the TRF has been declared as a global terrorist, and there is a right time to be again Pakistan be downgraded to a grey list. But I don't think it is going to happen because Pakistan still uses, Pakistan is still used by the US as a frontline state for the reason being, whatever you may do strategically, location of Pakistan is so important that US will always utilize it. Now even for Afghanistan, it does not want Afghanistan to go into totally in the hand of China. And you want sort of surveillance on Iran, you want also surveillance on China and Russia. So US will use Pakistan as a frontline state. It needs for cryptocurrency. Pakistan is also ready to cooperate with them for critical minerals also. So the point which comes is Pakistan is a hub center of terrorism. But yet America do not spell out in the same tone as India wants it. You remember after Operation Sindhu, the Western media played into the hands of Pakistan. Imagine for 10 days the media was giving one-sided story which was generated by the Pakistani lobbyists. But it was thereafter when, we have taken a charge of it and then the reality sunk in that Pakistan has been completely defeated in Operation Sindhu, and this operation has stopped because the DGM of Pakistan back to the DGM of India. But having said one thing, one must be very clear that why has the US mind changed now? Why they have now made TRF as a global terrorist? It is due to RIC. Now they are thinking that Russia, India, China, Russia and China are trying to lobby in India, trying to now make it the RIC will also take place. India has not shown any interest in that, but US will never like India to go into
Yes.
the lobby of Russia and China. So the point today is,
Okay.
everyone is playing its own game.
Okay.
We have to be careful.
Okay. Quick last word to you, Dilip Cherry. We're running out of time.
As we are getting to a stage where India needs both maturity as well as a greater and deeper sense of confidence in ourselves. We are all fairly certain that unless we mess it up, our growth is unstoppable. Unless we recognize that we are emerging as a significant force and stop hyphenating ourselves either with Pakistan, as Ambassador Mukherjee said, or even with China, because our entire development model is different. Our challenges are completely different. We are a democracy and we, hugely hope to stay that way. And that will be something that the rest of the world, whether it's the NATO countries, whether it's the Quad countries, whether it's the BRIC countries, look for leadership from countries which are totally democratic. The countries that are ruled out include Pakistan, China, and Russia. So you are looking at a global situation that's going to emerge. Let India be confident and take its decisive steps based on that confidence rather than on knee-jerk reactions of trying to match lobbying power for lobbying F or any other kind. We're doing well. We need to move in that direction.
All right. Let me, in fact, quickly allow you 30 seconds before I take a break, Pathikrit.
Completely agree. And see, for a country like Pakistan, which is desperately looking for more IMF and World Bank loans, they would always try to show some brownie points that Trump can earn very soon. And that's why, I'm sure Asim Munir's, lunch with Trump costed them quite a few $1 million.
Right.
So
I think we have, unfortunately, we are
that.
losing his video. We are having some technical connections with Pathikrit, unfortunately. All right. We've lost him, but we've run out of time. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. Let's slip into a short break.